Who am I? Hello. Okay. Hi, everyone. We are really excited to talk about rethinking sales compensation amid the Great Resignation. Very excited to be with you all today. We're having a little bit of technical issues, so if we cut in and out, we're working on it. Bear with us today. Today's event is hosted by the team at Modern Sales Pros, or MSP as we like to call it. For those of you not familiar, MSP is the world's largest revenue leadership community for those in sales management, sales and rev ops, all of the supporting disciplines. And our mission is to create an environment for our 20,000 and constantly growing members to answer questions they might struggle to answer on their own and see around corners that you might not even know are there. We do that through great live sessions like the one you're at today, and through a robust online forum. And we have started doing some in-person events, which I'm very excited about, and those have been quite fun, so we hope to see you soon. If you have not previously joined our MSP community before, you will be invited, so we hope that you join us. And if you like this content, I already know you will. You are going to love our 3-day Revenue Excellence Summit happening next week, so soon. I'm so ready for it. April 12th through 14th, we've pulled together 11 events of amazing content speakers. You're going to hear from revenue leaders at Drift, Lean Data, Pendo, Dialpad, Figma, Atrium. The list goes on and on and on. And Eduardo's going to drop a link to our chat so you don't miss it. But enough about MSP. This event is sponsored by the team at QuotaPath. So I'm going to pass to our QuotaPath sponsor to give us a little ins and outs of the company.
Thanks so much, Taylor. My name is Caroline Tarping. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Customer Success at QuotaPath. We're thrilled to have you here today, and I'll briefly share with you about QuotaPath and then introduce our panel. So anyone who's listening, who has felt the pain before of calculating commissions in the dreaded spreadsheet and the errors and time sink that can cause? This is what QuotaPath helps solve for. We streamline the commission process, help you design the right plans, get commission to your earners on time in the right way, in the right amounts, and give your commission earners visibility throughout that process. And this helps us help companies save time, gain efficiency, but even more importantly, really motivate sellers to close even more because they have visibility into what they can earn and when. And that, of course, will be a big topic for today's conversation as we think about the Great Resignation and how sales compensation has been impacted and how we stay ahead of the curve in the new trends in our market. So I would love to turn it over to the panelists to introduce themselves. Graham, I will start with you to say hello.
Yeah, hi everybody. Graham Collins, Chief of Staff at QuotaPath, which has meant a whole bunch of different things. I say that I do a job until we hire someone who's better at it than I am. And so that's been sales, marketing, partnerships, rev ops, finance, everything but engineering. But a major part of my role is that I sit down and help organizations build their comp plans. So I've done over 300 comp plan consults where I sit down and help folks figure out exactly how to pay their reps and what's the best way to format that.
Fantastic. And Lindsay, would you like to say hello?
Yep. My name is Lindsay Fine. I'm VP of Sales at Dispatch. Dispatch is an email production platform which helps organizations create emails at scale. And something that we've been really focused on recently is putting apps in email. So thinking about interactive experiences and bringing those directly to email, think like booking, calendar invites, that sort of thing. I'm part of the Great Resignation. So I'm really excited. I'm 6 months into my role at Dispatch. So excited to be a part of this discussion. And yeah, thanks for having me.
Fantastic. And Brianna, please.
Yes, I'm Brianna Yarborough. I am an executive RevOps leader, meaning I have done countless comp planning and pricing, modeling, and thinking about the whole forecasting and business performance perspective of any organization. I'm also a fractional CXO and advisor to a couple of marginalized startups, meaning that they are often undersupported and underfunded. And I am also co-founding a product called C Model. C Model is a revenue operations, revenue intelligence platform that sort of takes the forecasting planning piece of the business of the revenue operations framework and makes it a lot more simplified and gives you some strategic insights on the other end of that as output.
Fantastic. Wonderful. Well, I'll help set the stage for us, and then we'll start sharing some questions with the panel. And of course, we'll be taking questions from you as an audience throughout. So please feel free to pop those into the chat in the Q&A. So let's set the stage with data. McKinsey did a really interesting study late 2021, so we're already a year and a half into the pandemic, showed that 40% of employees are at least somewhat likely to leave their jobs within 3 to 6 months. And almost that same number will leave without another job lined up. And in the world of sales, it's even more prominent. Turnover on sales teams is 27% higher than the overall labor force. Now, if you're here, you already know that sales compensation plays a huge role in motivating, attracting, and retaining sellers. So what we're looking to talk through today is why it's so important to get sales compensation right, what trends our panelists are seeing as we have navigated the Great Resignation. And then the actionable piece for you is how you can adapt your compensation strategies to attract, retain, and succeed with top talent in the world of sales and sales comp. So to kick us off, I would love to hear each of you, and this one will go to all three of the panelists, talk a little bit more about your respective roles and tell us what are your key priorities and how does that relate to compensation?
Yeah, I can kick us off here. So, as I said, I've done all kinds of different things historically, but my most recent role before this was actually running an SDR organization. So I had about a 45-person SDR team, had 4 managers and 40 reps underneath me. And at one point, I rolled out a new comp plan, and it was so bad that we ended up going from a team of about 35 down to a team of 14, and I had to rebuild the organization from that because of a really poorly designed and poorly rolled out comp plan. And that's I'm falling on my sword here and taking complete credit for that. And I learned a lot about that, and it really showed me that compensation can be such a driving factor when it comes to people's decision to stay at a job, to leave a job, to start a new job. And then that's compounded by the 300 plus folks that I've talked with, trying to help them build their compensation plans.
Wonderful.
I would say from my perspective, as a revenue operations leader and going into an organization that is pre-IPO, we often think about and prioritize, enablement of our sellers and retaining top talent, high performers, keeping them so that we don't have to go through that ramp time that, we are forecasting, and that's informing our business performance and our business plan and what we might do in the next fiscal year or what we might do in the next quarter. And it's important, and it drives a foundational and key methodology for how we are operating as an organization and a holistic view of the business in general, not just your sales organization, not just your revenue operations, and just throwing something out, from a compensation plan perspective that sounds good. I've seen a lot of higher complexity. I say simplified is better. But I also would just mention that, in my experience, it is definitely one of the key components. High turnover, obviously, great resignation, and we've got some tips and tricks and tools up our sleeves to share today about how to mitigate some of that risk.
Yeah, so I'll talk about kind of what's top of mind for me right now. Having been like 6 months into this role, and I came from the last 4.5 years at Amazon, it's drastically different, like recruiting and hiring for a startup versus an Amazon. I think the way that they're structured generally are quite different. Combine that with the fact that everybody else is hiring, and it's really, really difficult right now. It's been eye-opening for me in terms of how to get creative. And already now we're 3 months into the year, and I've learned a ton already about what will and won't work. And I think I'm like just head first trying to figure out like what is that sweet spot that ultimately is going to be in the best interest of like the sales team, but to your point, Brianna, for the larger organization. Like how is what this like compensation package how's it going to really help with like the remainder of the company goals. And it's definitely challenging. And it's something that I feel like is an evolving process and always top of mind in various discussions that I have with other peers and other counterparts. So definitely an interesting discussion for sure.
Absolutely, it makes sense. And I think there's a lot of kind of a similar through line in what each of you has shared about how critical it is to get this right and the impact not just on your sales teams or commission earners, but the business as a whole, which is a great place to start. You know, Great Resignation or not, and we are going to talk about how some of these trends have changed. Would love to hear from the group how you have used comp plans to attract top talent and motivate and retain your sellers. You know, maybe even a couple of examples of what you're finding that the top talent you're looking to draw into the business is looking for today in comp plans. We will start with Lindsay if you are interested. Oh, did we cut you off, Brianna?
Sure. I'm happy to start off. I am definitely seeing, you know, the trends that have been top of mind recently have been around sign-on bonuses and allowing people the opportunity to really get on their feet. So draw programs maybe for a 6 to 12 month time frame that really allows them, and it depends on, you know, there's variables that come into the equation, such as what are you selling? What is your business model? Are you enterprise go-to-market? Are you subscription-based? How easy is it to sell your product? However, from an enterprise go-to-market, which is just kind of like the mega of all mega comp plans and gives you the most complexity and most sort of pain point and friction there, I would say, you know, I mentioned from a traction standpoint, sign-on bonuses, you know, the draw program immediately coming in, MBO programs, allowing you to do things like get through specific trainings or evaluate the sales process and find some gaps or opportunities, things that are financially backed by the organization that have, you know, money tied to it, but are not directly tied to selling the product quite yet. And then retention bonuses, again, those MBO programs that goes into the retention portion of it as well. So that's what I've been seeing on my side of the business and what I've been, you know, especially Series A through Series D sort of organizations pre-IPO. These are the things that we're considering and what we've deployed just to get a little bit creative in this time where people are just, you know, sort of jumping from job to job until they find the right mix of what they need and what they want.
Yeah, just to echo Brianna, the draw program is something that we have also started to test out. And I'll go back and say too, I've been actively trying to hire since the beginning of the year, and I started at the end of October. So it's all like very new for me from the dispatch perspective. Something else I think outside of just pure compensation is like looking at how are we keeping people from burning out and how are we addressing that? Because we know that over the past 2 years, like that's an active problem. So one thing that we're doing right now is a 4-day work week, which has been something that we've also used in kind of in these discussions to talk through, like making sure that not only are we setting them up for success from, you know, a sales perspective and an organization, but also we're addressing their need to kind of like make sure that they have that balance. I think that's something that we've learned over the past couple of years, that people are now starting to kind of put higher than other things in their lives. It's like, do we have the balance? Do they feel like they have a place to be able to manage everything? The draw perspective from a sales aspect is definitely great. And I think something else that I've been really pushing in discussions is we have been largely an inbound team from a sales perspective and really trying to push outbound and start to set up that structure. That's something that I'm looking for when I'm hiring, is someone to help me establish that and help be a part of that. And that's also really exciting. And, you know, the right person is going to like want to jump on board with that, but just trying to like look at bigger picture outside of just you come in like in the first 3 months, you need to do this. And like, here's your number. But I think that, yeah, there's a lot of different factors to consider for sure.
That makes a lot of sense. And as you've shared those ideas, you're kind of touching on some of the trends and dynamics that I think we're all facing as we look to recruit in today's market. And, I'd love to hear a little bit from the group about how this has looked different during the process of the Great Resignation, and specifically in terms of DE&I. So this is something we're all very focused on as organizations across the board. But what does that mean for compensation plans, and how can those be used to help with DE&I goals?
Yeah, well, as the token white guy on the call here, I figure I might as well be the first one to speak up on this. And one thing that I am a big proponent of is standardized compensation plans. Lots and lots of research points to the fact that if you have different compensation plans or different compensation structures for different people within your sales organization, you end up underpaying women and people of color. And it's not a deliberate decision. Hopefully, I doubt anybody here would say that it's a deliberate decision, but it's just something that happens. And a big thing that I'm seeing is this push for standardization of compensation plans. Now, it may be because I talk about it a lot, and so people know that, but standardizing those comp plans so that there isn't that oh, well, this person earns less than that person. There are, of course, are situations where you need to pay a senior seller more than a junior seller, or have those retention bonuses, or what have you. All of those are of course acceptable, but it has to be a function of the job, and it has to be something that is attainable by everybody. Because if you just have, well, this person's a better negotiator. I've been on calls like that where it's like, well, this person gets a base of $150,000 versus this person of 120. And I say, well, what's the difference? They have the same quota. And they say, well, he's just a better negotiator. And that candidly sucks. So that's something that I've seen being more pushing more and more towards, and especially with the lack of the geography being a big thing when it comes to compensation. As we're coming a flattening of the world here, but a flattening of the U.S. I'm up in Portland, Maine, and there traditionally not a ton of SaaS jobs in the Portland, Maine area, but I have 2,000 different companies in San Francisco who I could go work for, and so we see a lot more standardization of comp plans.
Lindsay, I'd love to hear from you too. We were talking in the green room before about some ideas on how transparent you get about OTE when you go out to recruit versus sharing it later in the recruiting cycle. What's your take on that?
Yeah, it's been interesting. This is the first time that I have experienced this from a hiring perspective, having OTE listed on the rec. I actually really appreciate it though, because to Graham's point, everybody knows then like what you're coming in at. There are no surprises. And I think back in past roles where that was one of the first conversations that we had is like, what are your expectations? And does this align? Where the folks that we're outreaching or reaching out to and having come and express interest in the role, like they know what to expect. It's listed there. So everyone is very clear, and it does help to kind of keep things equal across the board. And there's like a very, a flat line that in that sense, it's like, this is what it is. And while, we appreciate the salespeople trying to negotiate, it's like, we're trying to make it equal across the board. So it's been interesting. And I actually really appreciate the fact that it's called out. And I feel like I'm also starting to see this more on others as well, where I hadn't seen it before.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. And I think it makes a lot of sense, right? That you have that transparency and you have it out of the gate. You actually touched on, Lindsay, the impact of burnout during the Great Resignation. Obviously, there's a lot of research that's come out around that, but we don't even need the research to know it because we hear it from our teams. And so thinking outside the box about how we provide the right incentives and motivation to our teams, what have you all considered outside the realm of just the dollars or the bonus? Maybe they don't even show up in comp plans, but the kinds of things or cultural dynamics or additive benefits that are really motivational to the talent you're trying to hire and retain today.
Something that we do is we shut down for 2 weeks at the end of the year. So think about, and you think about a sales, I've never been in a sales org where that was the case, and often had to like bank all of my vacation to be able to spend it with, you know, my family during the holidays. I love that. So it was like starting December 24th, we were shut down, everybody, until the second, or, you know, when the first of the year. I think that is one way that we're addressing that, is like, especially after a year of hard work and a year of working hard in the pandemic, no less, of just saying, hey, we recognize like this is a time for us to shut down. It is wild to think about that as like end of year, because it's a lot of, it's fiscal year, end of fiscal year for a lot of people, not everybody, but it's so refreshing, because also I knew that I could go and check and stuff, but there was no requirement, right? And from my team too, I was encouraging like we encourage everyone to shut off and to be very transparent about that with customers and everyone ahead of time, like putting it on signature, like we will be shut down between like these dates. But I think it is so important. The other thing, which this comes up quite a bit too, is PTO. If my team asks me, I'm just like, go, like, you don't have to ask me, like, take the time. You've got the time, take it. I don't need to know what it is. Put it on the calendar. That's it. And being like really, really just mindful of like, I'm very concerned about my team's well-being. So whatever they need to do, whether that be take random days here and there, like just take them and just be open about that.
I echo the PTO and being very intentional about giving people the time that they need to refresh, recharge. So we have been seeing a lot of unlimited PTO policies. We have been seeing 4-day work weeks. I'm like, oh, give me that. Yeah, I'll take the 4-day work week, or first Fridays, where you get the first Friday of every month off. And then I've also been seeing mental health provider programs made available for free to the organization. So you can talk to a therapist, you can text them at any given time if you're having a stressful moment that you need, you know, just anonymous, just feedback or support from. And in addition to that, just many other perks, such as educational materials. In the sales world, reading is huge. And so giving someone a monthly or quarterly amount of money that they can use to just upgrade themselves and feel like they are, you know, being challenged, they're learning and growing in their position, goes a long way.
That makes a lot of sense. And I'll just comment, and then Graham, I'd love for you to jump in too. We got a question for a follow-up for Lindsay. Is that year-end shutdown only if annual numbers are hit, or is it regardless? And Lindsay commented back, it's regardless. So just really sort of recognizing that time is necessary for the teams. Graham, please.
Yeah, I was going to say there are a lot of things that we view as perks that or can be messaged as perks that maybe aren't necessarily historically been regarded as perks. You know, one thing, you know, we talk about unlimited PTO. It seems like every startup has unlimited PTO nowadays. I've actually seen a couple of interesting things. One is a minimum time off, that where you have to take a certain number of days off per quarter or per month. Another is actually not unlimited PTO, just very generous PTO, 25, 30 days off, whatever it may be, enough where people actually feel like they've earned that PTO. That's one of the major complaints that I've heard about unlimited PTO is I don't feel like I've earned it if everybody gets unlimited PTO, whereas I can actually, like, you know, if I see it accruing, I can say, okay, I can spend that PTO. So it's an interesting way of looking at it. One thing that we do here that is, again, sort of a strange thing is actually having an office, having an in-office sales environment that has historically been like, oh, you know, a downside. Oh, you know, you're not fully remote. And some people may still think of it as something that's a downside, but having an in-office sales team actually can be seen as a perk. And I think oftentimes is for folks, because there is a subset of salespeople who thrive in an in-office environment. And so things that might have not historically been seen as perks because of the Great Resignation, because of the pandemic, actually could be seen as perks for folks.
I think that's a great perspective. And you know, it dovetails with some of the data in that study I cited at the beginning shares 3 things that employees value more than employers in the studies that have been done. And it's employees looking for a sense of belonging, the sense that they are valued by their manager and their organization, and that they have the potential for advancement. So we've certainly observed at QuotaPath that part of the package that a seller is evaluating is what potential they have to grow within the organization. What do the career paths look like? How are they going to be supported on that journey? What, master level skills will they develop that they can take with them throughout their careers? So I'd be curious, either Brianna or Lindsay, obviously Graham and I share the QuotaPath perspective, how you are seeing those desires crop up as you're working with or recruiting sellers.
Absolutely huge. I recently had an SDR reporting into me that wanted to be an AE, and we were paving the way to figure out how to get the skills and fill those gaps to allow for that opportunity to present itself. And we made it there through coaching and mentoring. And again, those educational buckets of money that you allocate and your forecasting plan for your sales department is highly important. We did it through books and communities like Pavilion and modern sellers. And outside of that, just continuing to think about the DEI perspective and the retention portion of it, because it also comes to play in the sales organization. And I've seen it come up time and time again where performance management is not, something that is rolled out at the organization just yet because it's too early, or we just haven't prioritized it. We're too busy trying to find product market fit and get in some revenue. And so as you think about your career and just kind of moving up into that next space and how people are currently thinking about their careers, especially as they're entering the job market from that lower level sort of sales role, and be clear about developing career ladders, be clear about what the expectations are around performance and how it ties to the company's strategy, the company's business performance, OKRs, things like that, so that we all can, obviously advocate as managers for those opportunities. And then again, DEI and retention go heavily into that perspective. You see people get sort of stopped in their tracks, and it is important to find mentorship and sponsorship in your organization and outside of your organization as you think about evolving in your career.
Before we shift to the next question, I had one follow-up from the audience for Graham, which is, how does that minimum time off really work in practice? Is there an enforcement mechanism if people haven't taken the minimum?
I've never worked at an organization that has it. So I can't speak to that. I don't know if Lindsay or Brianna have. If I was setting it up, I don't think that it's one of those things where you don't really have to mandate it, because what you do is during your one-on-ones, you say like, hey, you haven't taken it off. You haven't taken it off. I mean, I'm not gonna force you to come into work. I'm not gonna turn off your Slack. I have done that for somebody when she was on her honeymoon. Lily Yoon, one of the hardest working people I know, but she had to turn off her Slack when she was on her honeymoon. So I don't think that we'd go that far. But I think that it's more of like a thing that you tout and you build your culture around it, as opposed to mandating it. That feels sort of counter against the theory of it.
I've also never worked for an organization that had a minimum time off policy. I do see it in job descriptions quite frequently, but the unlimited PTO policy is not constrained in any way. And I would envision that a minimum PTO policy is something that is managed through an HR's IS system that they are paying attention to, and your people ops team is managing, not quite the sellers team. Maybe from a manager's perspective, you might get an email that says, hey, these are the folks that have not taken their minimum time off. They've got 1 month left to take it. Encourage them to do so. But I really see it as a people ops function.
I was just going to say, I've worked for an organization where from the system perspective, it's managed and you will stop accruing if you have earned a certain number and have not taken it, which is actually like really great. And I found that I often, so to back up to like during my time with this particular organization, I had gone on maternity leave and was still accruing PTO. So I had a lot, and then hit the pandemic and no one's taking notifications. That makes it a bit challenging, but every pay period you would get a notification saying like, you are over, you will not be accruing anymore, which really does say, okay, like I have earned this time, I need to take it. And otherwise, like it's just like, I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot in that sense, because no one else, I'm not going to be getting anything. No one's going to force me to go. So I did kind of like that, because it does force you to take it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that makes sense. Well, I think you've all shared some fantastic examples of ways that we can motivate and attract talent that is kind of outside the traditional comp plan or compensation realm. But to come back to that, the reality is a lot of us are facing a market in which people are looking for strong OTEs to want to come and work for you. And so I would love to hear from the group, and Brianna, we'll start with you. How are you approaching it when you get that question from a candidate or that ask for a much, much higher OTE than you might have been prepared to offer for the role?
I mean, transparency is all that you can provide in those sort of situations. I know that it happens. I know that it is there. People are using tools like, what is it, levels.fyi, that kind of compare against what these, big, larger companies are paying. And if you're a startup, a Series A, Series B, Series C, you're not equipped to pay some of the same compensations from an OTE perspective. And so the transparency, having it on the job description, going into the first initial conversations from the recruiter and stating this is our range. What were you thinking? Is this an alignment? If there is any opportunity to stretch it just a little bit, maybe we can find a common ground there. But when it's way off, and just not in the budget, you have to walk away and go where there is alignment.
Absolutely makes sense. Any other perspectives from this?
Totally agreed on that. Sorry, you were going to talk there. I was just going to say that, yeah, the actual like attainability of those on target earnings. Oftentimes I hear these people who have 350K on target earnings, and I ask them, okay, well, how much are you actually earning? And they're like, oh, 200 or whatever. And it's like, okay, well, so we're not actually, it's not a 350 OTE.
Yeah, I think it goes back to, like Brianna said, and like I talked about before, like transparency. It's there, reconfirming it, and just like reiterating, like, hey, in this case, like I'm trying to build something, I need assistance with that. And like, to Brianna's point, like Series A startup not going to be able to compete with the FANG, right? In that sense, but I think it also comes down to like the candidates, and like, is this what they want? And like, like Graham, like you said, like how much are you actually like, so that's your OTE, but what are you, what did you earn last year? And being like, having that discussion, because that changes quite a bit.
Yes, definitely. Well, we've gotten a great question from the audience on territory planning and comp planning. I'm going to come back to that in just a minute. But before we do, I think this is a good opportunity to bring up a rather provocative idea that we were also talking about as a group before the webinar started. And Lindsay, you'd raised the notion of, why do sellers have to have a variable compensation when the rest of the organization is on a fixed salary? So share with us your experience of having worked with an organization that took a different approach.
Yeah, definitely. I remember like when I first saw it, when I was, applying to this role and sort of getting an understanding of what compensation looked like, I thought it was strange. But when you look at bigger picture, across the organization, when we think about company goals, other roles are all full salary. And if they're not achieving or doing what they're, tasked to do, is a different conversation where, sales is given this on target, and like then we struggle with like the low quota attainment, ultimately churn, and then recruiting again. And I heard on a podcast like recently, which I feel like is pretty low, that the cost to move someone out, and like the cost of a bad hire is like $35K. So if you think about these things, you're bringing the wrong people in. Ultimately, they're not happy. They're not achieving their quota, and they're going to churn. Like, how much does that actually cost you over and over? If you think about bringing in a rep at a full salary, like there's other benefits, right? Like you hold them to higher standards. Like it ultimately requires us as sales leaders to think differently about performance and metrics and overall compensation. But there's like a very clear path too of like, okay, look, I'm invested in you as a candidate, and I want you to come in and succeed, and I want you to do well, and I want you to feel like you've got the tools to do so. I think it also like, it really does kind of think about bigger picture from a company perspective too, of if you've got reps that are commissioned, they're thinking about new logos, they're thinking about dollar signs, they're thinking about multi-year agreements. Are they thinking about ultimately what's best for the organization, or are they trying to hit those metrics? So I think like it's an interesting thing for us to think about. And having been in an organization with sales reps that had this model, like there was still a lot of highly competitive sales folks who wanted to get promoted, who wanted to level up, who were able to do that without having this like rigid comp plan that was largely based on delivery. It's just an interesting thing for us to discuss.
It definitely is. And it would be unusual for me too. And that's something I haven't really seen as much of before, but I think that's important for us to kind of take on for size and consider these unique ideas. So we've got a great question from the audience that I'll share it with the group, and Graham, I'll come to you first with your experience in this, but interested to know how many months in advance of year end you typically start with your territory planning, your quota planning, your compensation planning, and sort of just start to get things ready for the coming year.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I have a calendar that I've pulled up on a few webinars in the past. And if anybody wants to see the calendar, give me a shout. We probably should put it on our website. But really, sales compensation planning is not something, in my opinion, that is like a one-time event. You do it, you say, okay, starting on October 1st, we're going to do this. It's going to take a month, and then we're going to be good to go. Obviously, you want to roll out comp plans right around the first of the year, so you can work backwards there. But I actually see sales comp planning as being kind of an ongoing exercise. Meeting with reps, meeting with managers, looking at how we're performing. Are the behaviors actually being driven that we're looking for throughout the course of the year? So I don't necessarily think that there's a number of months beforehand that you need to be focused on. Yes, of course, you want to finalize your comp plan for 2023. I'd recommend probably finalizing it by December 1st, so that you can pressure test it and do all of that stuff. But as far as like how long beforehand, I think of it as an ongoing process, as opposed to a specific like start on October 1st. But if you put my feet to the fire, I'd say probably start by October 1st, have a first draft in place by November 1st, have a final draft in place by December 1st, so that you can roll out on January 1st.
I have done it the same way, Graham, at most of the organizations that I've worked for. And I would say it is an ongoing process, because there was an interesting experience for me. My predecessor had put together a comp plan. I came in and reviewed it, and also did not spot this one little error that would have ended up paying out a seller a couple $1 million. And so unfortunate as windfall clauses are, and as much as we don't like to see them, we had to utilize that particular opt-out in that unfortunate situation. But it is an ongoing, it goes to beg the same thing that you were stating, Graham. It's an ongoing process. You have to review it. at every corner, when you have deals that enter sort of the last stages, the last phases of the sales cycle, what does this actually mean for the company? It's an ongoing process. Let's look at the commission. Let's make sure everything is all buttoned up. We've crossed our T's, dotted our I's, and we know exactly what to expect. And yeah, there's no other way to handle that sort of situation. It's just an ongoing process and an operational cadence that you look at ongoing throughout the year.
Not to throw an extra bonus question in here, but it sounds like, Brianna, you've done this. Lindsay, have you ever made changes to comp plans mid-year? I have. Like I said, I rolled out just a terrible comp plan and had to make a complete change. But Lindsay, have you ever done that?
Yeah, and it's tough because I feel like there's like the earns trust from the team to like, okay, have you actually thought through this? Like, did you think through this, or are you just on the fly? And it's not something that is a comfortable conversation regardless. So I like agree with what both of you have said. Like, the sooner the better. The sooner like you can dig into it and start to think about like how this could go in any different direction, the better off you'll be. But certainly not something that you want to do mid-year, but has happened.
Yep. Makes sense. And you know, one of the things I think we're always looking at, or I find myself looking at as we're building comp plans, are how we're going to structure things like accelerators or other motivational aspects of the plan for the teams. You know, we've got a question from the audience about, in addition to the sign-on bonuses and MBO structure and retention bonuses we've talked about, what about just that sort of ongoing motivational accelerators and structure to the plans? How have you built those in, and then how do you use them in even recruiting talent? I will go to Graham first.
Sure. I just unmuted. Well, that's actually one thing that I wrote down that I meant to mention is overperformance. I mean, that's if you're competing against those people who are making, have an offer for 400K or whatever, overperformance components are really important there, where you don't just earn 10% commission off of everything you sell. You earn 10% until you hit your quota, and then you earn 20%. And showing the going back to the transparency point, obviously I'm also a big proponent of transparency here, but showing, okay, this is what our average rep is making. Our average rep is hitting the OTE. And then if you figure that reps are on a normal curve, no sales rep thinks of themselves as average. And so you can show like, oh, our top performing reps, if you're hitting 150% of quota, how much you're earning. So I actually see those competitors or those accelerators as being a real competitive advantage when it comes to hiring, of like, you can overachieve. And when you overachieve, you're going to earn drastically more.
I see the same thing, as we're looking and recruiting, as folks are not interested in joining an organization where they can't earn more when they perform more. And I think that goes with some of just what the market's looking for in the Great Resignation anyway, is how have you built a plan that aligns to what your business values? And presumably your business values may be closing certain types of deals, or maybe you're trying to incentivize the sale of a certain product or certain size of deal, and certainly over performance. And so have you structured a benefit for me that aligns to that? Brianna, did you have a comment as well?
I was simply going to say that I completely agree. Accelerators have been a component of our compensation plans in the past, and specifically in enterprise go-to-market environments. And it is also where we had quite a bit of complexity with our compensation planning, because we were still trying to figure things out. And when you're figuring things out, you don't want to lose, those high performers until you start to pull out things like accelerators. And we did it in a more of a retention standpoint, not necessarily attracting talent, but it did go into both buckets. And we're able to bring in some great talent to continue to further our revenue organization from there.
So there's a really fascinating one that I think, Brianna, would be a great one for you because of the experience you have, especially working with a number of different startups. But we've all been there. We're trying to make a financial plan for the first time, or we're going through a new phase of growth. How do you manage setting appropriate targets when something about the product or the strategic direction of the company is still evolving.
Yes, I think that kind of was a part of the last thing that I was saying is, you know, we were still trying to figure it out, and it was because of a product change. We had a new way of bringing the product to market, and we were bringing on, most of our sales team was less than 6 months into the organization, and so we had to get pretty creative about how we addressed compensation altogether to make it appealing to, one, stick it out with us as we were going through the growing pains of working with our product and engineering teams to develop what we've decided that the direction that we're going to move into. But not only that, it's also, you know, you're bringing new people into the organization, and there's not a lot of maturity in the organization to begin with. And so you're heavily depending on like revenue operations and sales enablement and our teams to really get off the ground. And we want to reduce the ramp time. We want to reduce the sales cycle time. And the best way to do that is to get everybody involved. And so that MBO program that I mentioned earlier, I actually had a team of account executives, account executives that were supporting me in really evaluating what our sales cycle looked like. It was a 12 to 24 month sales cycle, enterprise go-to-market, very complex, lots of stakeholders, and we had to digest it. And I tied it to an MBO program, and they were compensated for their time.
No, I think that's really fascinating, right? And I think it must, I imagine, breed some of that trust and credibility of there's some aspect of this that we acknowledge we're still figuring out, and we'll be honest about that, and we'll create a structure that can work within it. Now, let's say we've done that and we've put a plan in place and we made some directional estimates about what OTEs or quotas need to look like. And then we find, and this is another great question from the audience, that too many, the phrasing was too many people, and I don't know where too many hits, but are really hitting that OTE. So we're having high attainment across the organization and high achievement of OTE or even higher than OTE. What do you think about that moment and organizations that would consider adjusting up their quotas and expectations?
I think that's also why I am so intentional about operational cadences. And so we often have these conversations on a quarterly basis, and we set the expectation with the organization saying that we're going to pivot strategically based on what we're finding and seeing in the data. And I have not found that to be a problem personally, as long as you're setting that expectation up front.
Yeah, but nobody likes it when your quota doubles, month over month, or quarter over quarter, or even year over year. And I think that the way that can be handled is, I want every one of my reps to hit on target earnings. I do. Now I'm setting a target where, again, it's a normal curve. Not every single rep is going to hit my quota unless my quota is way too low, and then everybody else is overachieving. So there are a few things when I talk about quota setting. There's an idea of this quota to on target earnings ratio, and people throw out 5x as kind of the golden standard, where if a rep is earning 100,000 on target, their quota would be 500,000 over the course of the year. Now, that number, that multiplier, actually changes over time as your organization gets bigger, as you're providing additional resources. And I think a lot of it comes to the logic and the explaining to your reps why their quota is going up. Your quota is not going up just because everybody's hitting their target. Everybody's hitting their target because we're putting more resources into this. You're having your SDRs, more marketing resources, more enablement. And because of that, each person has to sell more because to pay for those things. And not only that, but we're also proving to you that you are able to sell more. So your quota is not going up just because everybody's hitting it. Your quota is going up as a result of everybody selling more because of all these additional resources.
That's a great perspective on the context, and I think it goes a long way. Well, we are coming close to the end of our time, and I would love for each of the panelists to leave one thing behind for the audience. If the team walks away today with kind of one key takeaway about the trends you've seen with the Great Resignation, or the strategies you've employed to help motivate and put the right comp plans in place in that context, what would you leave behind? Brianna, you're off mute, so I will start with you.
Out of what would I leave behind? I was not anticipating you to go that way. I was anticipating
Just one kind of key takeaway for the audience today.
I would say that the few takeaways that I would leave with this audience is that, simplicity is always better. The more complicated things are, with your selling motion, your go-to-market motion, the business model, the more complicated things can get, especially in our current environment in the Great Resignation. But as much as you can simplify it and leave it in layman's terms, the more it'll be appreciated by the sellers and the rest of the organization. You have to partner with finance and HR, and there's other stakeholders that are involved in this process. And so, if you're talking about all of the potential creative ways that we can, retain top talent, attract top talent, if you're doing all of those things at once, that gets really complicated really quickly. And so think about what works best for your organization by aligning it with your strategic initiatives. What is it that we're trying to attain? Are we doubling revenue? Look at it from a top-down and a bottoms-up perspective in your forecasting, and really try to keep it simple.
That's a great perspective. Lindsay, what about you?
Yeah, so I'll echo Brianna in keeping it simple. And then the second, and probably like one of the biggest things for me, is transparency. So be open and honest with candidates. I think that's something that I have tried to be really, really mindful of in every single conversation. Like, this is what I'm trying to do. This is what I'm looking for. Like, this is what I'm trying to build. It goes back to the conversation around like potentially thinking about full salary as you're like getting going, but being as open and honest and direct with candidates, it goes so far, both in that process, but even thinking about long-term as you have folks join you. It's just something that is often overlooked. And I think we're eager, especially now being so competitive, to try to get in the top talent. But I think that there's a lot of value in being just very direct and honest with like what you're trying to do and what you're hoping to accomplish in the process.
Completely agree. Graham, what would you share?
Yeah, well, I was thinking about this. What I was going to say was a lot of what Brianna and Lindsay said. I always say that my 3 rules for comp plans, whether it's the Great Resignation, whether it's normal times, is that comp plans should be simple, logical, and fair. And it's exactly what Brianna and Lindsay said. So you took mine. So instead, I'll go with don't try to build a comp plan alone. We talked about this. Yes. RevOps should be involved. Finance should be involved, and sales should be involved. Sales tries to pay the reps as much as they can. Finance tries to pay them as little as they can. Sorry for finance people on the line. And so don't try to build it alone. That's the exact problem that I've talked about. My bad comp plan, that was my issue. I tried to do it by myself. I was a brand new director, thought I knew what I was doing, and built a bad comp plan because of it. So use resources, whether it's MSP, whether it's other organizations that you're a part of. I'm always here for you as well. If you go to QuotaPath.com under the resources, you can see comp plan consults. Like I said, there's over 300 of those. So don't try to go it alone. Have somebody else take a look at it, because that's how you avoid those situations where you accidentally pay reps $2 million in commissions. You can avoid them that way.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for everyone who's joined us today, and MSP for helping us host such a wonderful session. Hopefully what we've left you with is, why it's so critical for us to get it right when it comes to sales compensation, and how some of those trends are changing with what people are looking for today as they look for a new organization or want to stick around with one, and then some practical and tactical ideas that you can take back into your organizations as you consider what will work best for you.
And thank you very much.
Perfect.
Yeah, thank you very much, Caroline, for everything. Thank you, the panelists. I learned so much today. It was an amazing panel, and thank you for the audience for all the comments in the chat and all the questions in the Q&A. While the panelists and I hang out backstage, I'm gonna make sure the MSP team is getting the recording done, and it will be up on our website. And once you're there to check the recording, also check the future events that we have. We have so many events coming up as good as this one. So please make sure you visit the Modern Sales Pros website to see the recording, and you will be able to have this information handy when you need. need. So panelists, let's go hang out backstage. Thank you all for coming. I hope to see you in the next MSP event.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.